station in the city, a British soldier stood, talking to the people there if the people would. Some just stared in hatred and others turned in pain, and the lonely British soldier wished he was back home again. Come join the British Army, said the posters in his town. See the world and have your fun, come serve before the crown. The jobs were hard to come by and he could not face the dole, so he took his country's shilling and enlisted on the roll. But there was no fear of fighting, the empire long was lost. Just 10 years in the army, getting paid for being bossed. Then leave a man experienced, a man who's made the grade, a medal and a pension, some memories and a trade. Then came the call to Ireland as the call had come before. Another bloody chapter in an endless civil war. The priests, they stood on both sides, the priests, they stood behind. Another fight in Jesus' name, the blind against the blind. The soldiers stood between them, between the whistling stones, and then the broken bottles that led to broken bones. The petrol bombs that burned his hands, the nails that pierced his skin, and wished that he had stayed at home, surrounded by his kin. The station filled with people, the soldier soon was bored, but better in the station than where the people warred. The room filled up with mothers, with daughters and with sons, who stared with itchy fingers at the soldier and his guns. A yell of fear, a screech of brakes, a shattering of glass. The window of the station broke to let the package pass. A scream came from the mothers as they ran towards the door, dragging children crying from the bomb upon the floor. The soldier stood and could not move, his gun he could not use. He knew the bomb had seconds and not minutes on the fuse. He could not run to pick it up and throw it in the street. There were far too many people there, too many running feet. Take cover, yelled the soldier, take cover for your lives. And the Irishmen threw down their young and stood before their wives. They turned towards the soldier, their eyes alive with fear. For God's sake, save our children or they'll end the short lives here. The soldier moved towards the bomb, his stomach like a stone. Why was this his battle, God? Why was he alone? He lay down on the package and he murmured one farewell to those at home in England, to those he loved so well. He saw the sights of summer, felt the wind upon his brow. The young girls in the city parks, how precious were they now? The soaring of the swallow, the beauty of the swan, the music of the turning earth, so soon would it be gone. A muffled soft explosion and the room began to quake. The soldier blown across the floor, his blood a crimson lake. They never heard him cry or shout, they never heard him moan. And they turned their children's faces from the blood and from the bone. The crowd outside soon gathered and the ambulances came to carry off the body of a pawn lost to the game. And the crowd, they clapped and jeered and they sang their rebel songs. One soldier less to interfere where he did not belong. But will the children growing up learn at their mother's knee the story of the soldier who bought their liberty, who used his youthful body as the means towards the end, who gave his life to those who called him murderer, not friend?
Well, hello and welcome everyone to Forgotten Voices Media here on a Monday evening, and I guess it's going to be a show that I guess that each and every one of you, at the very end of it, you will be thinking that, people that came here to give themselves, to stand between what could have been civil war and a sense of normality for the people here of Northern Ireland. What happened to our guests whenever they did that is something I would say that would bring a tear to anyone. And whenever I look at the circumstances surrounding the Ballygawley bus bombing, and I look at the bus that these guys were on whenever this happened, I'm very surprised that these guys are here to actually tell the story this evening. So yeah, it's going to be one of those stories where we'll all come out of the back of, I guess, with a better understanding as to why people like this, I guess, were blown up in the way that they were, and what happened to them as a result on the aftermath of I guess, that day. So, what I would like to do right now is I would like to play you some footage from what happened on the day of the Ballygawley bus bombing on the 20th of August in 1988.
Troop and police reinforcements have been drafted into the area in a bid to track down the murderers. No one on board the coach escaped injury when a landmine containing 200 pounds of explosives was detonated by the provisional IRA. The coach was blasted off the road by the force of the explosion. It was packed with off-duty servicemen from the 1st Battalion, the Light Infantry, returning to their barracks from leave in England. The dead and the injured were scattered over a 100-yard area. Many had to be cut free from the mangled wreckage.
My first impression of it was I was confronted with a young body that was lapped around a lamppost, and his whole face was totally mutilated, and he obviously was dead. There were other screams coming for help for the bodies that were trapped in the bus. There were some of them between the bus and the fence. There were other ones trapped in the bus. There were people in the drains surrounding the place.
We lifted the bus up off the ground to get pulled boys out. We were pulling boys out, and we had nothing to hold on because there wasn't legs to hold on to them. The scene was just horrific. It was horrifying. There was blood everywhere, and it's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. The people that have done that have no conscience whatsoever, so they haven't. None whatsoever.
If our Secretary of State had any heart, if our Prime Minister had any heart, then it would take tears out of a stone to see this, and we have been subjected to it for far too long.
A major inquiry has now started into how the bombers knew when and where to strike on this stretch of road against an unmarked army coach.
The route, because it is a main trunk route to Omagh, the route was used by the army and by the police.
In the light of that, would it have been under close security?
We did pay particular attention to this route.
And last night, were you aware of any journey that would have been taken by the soldiers?
No.
It was on this same road that 4 members of the Ulster Defence Regiment were killed by another IRA landmine 4 years ago. At one time, it was reported to have been declared off-limits to members of the security services. Today, the flags were flying at half-mast at the soldiers' barracks in Omagh. 28 of their comrades are still in hospital. Each of them is being attended by their own personal nurse. 5 remain on the critical list. David Chater, ITN in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, who couldn't be moved by looking at that scene and how that it was described? What I would just like to do here at this point, I would like to pop up a picture for everyone to look at the bus and to try to understand what it must have been like to have been in that bus and for the bus to have ended up the way that it did. And, again, I would say that I'm amazed that anyone came out of this bus alive. Wow. Just wow. I don't know what to say when I see something like that. And that's so many times in our history, did that happen? And for what? For people coming here to serve and protect both sides of the community, warring factions, to keep people apart. And this is what happens, and this is what happened all so many times right across the history of Northern Ireland, so-called Troubles. Kenny, again, this is going to be one of those nights where you look at what happened, and what was it like to be in that bus, for that bomb to go off? It would shock anyone, Kenny. Sorry, Kenny, just unmute your mic there. Kenny, can you unmute your mic? Yeah?
Yes, John. Apologies. Right. Okay. Yes. John, yes, absolutely. And I think something that's particularly stark with Ballygawley is the age of the young soldiers who were on that bus. Obviously, the vast majority were aged between 18 and 21, 22 years. There were a small number who were older. But obviously, they were travelling back from the airport at Aldergrove to the barracks, and essentially the provisional IRA lay in wait at an opportune moment to detonate a bomb, which obviously murdered 8 young men and had the impact of 28 others being very seriously physically or psychologically injured on that night. It was a particularly brutal experience for those concerned. That stretch of road is extremely dark at the best of times, but apparently that night it was pitch dark. And obviously the melee that followed, the local people whom came on the scene and attempted to give aid, a local GP in the area who is a hero for these soldiers and for many others, what he managed to do that night in keeping people alive. But also obviously the buses that came on the scene, the bands, personnel, the young people. So this incident didn't happen in isolation of a very much wider impact upon the broader community. And it's my great pleasure to know these soldiers and families down the years, to get to know them personally and to see the amazing, courageous, dignified and extremely restrained people that they are.
You got to excuse us here with the mic situation. When we've so many people on the screen, it's best to keep our mics muted and then open them up whenever we're about to talk. So at this point, I'm going to bring in Scouse Leatherbarrow, is it, or James? So I'm going to bring him in, and Kenny, again, if you can just introduce James to the screen, and we'll go over to James, and then we'll ask James about what happened on that day. Welcome to the screen, James, and over to you,
mate,
Kenny.
all right.
Yeah, folks, it's my great pleasure to introduce James Leatherbarrow, or Scouse as he's affectionately known to anybody that knows him to any degree or level. This is, I suppose, is where our story started, certainly my involvement with Ballygawley, because it was Scouse who all those years ago on the 25th anniversary had left. I wonder if he remembers, on the UTV website, he had left quite a significant comment on that day, a comment which was very much about hurt and injustice around what had happened. And I had picked up that comment that day and had left a message for him just to explain who I was and that maybe we could have a conversation. And Scouse, true to his word, that night we were talking, and then that was in the August. And by the November, just a matter of 3 months later, the first contingent of guys from England came back for the first time to Ballygawley. So all I can say is that without Scouse's push and his wish and will to have his boys come back, this may not have happened. And he's a larger-than-life character. He loves his crack. And I'm very much indebted that I know him now as a friend, never mind anything else. So, Scouse, over to you, man.
Oh, cheers, Kenny. Thanks for that, mate.
Yeah. Scouse, I would just like to ask you, okay, so was this what age were you whenever this happened? How long were you in the army? And I mean, had you any other tours of duty before that you came to what happened in Ballygawley?
I was 21 when it happened. It was our first tour. Well, it was my first tour of I think our 18-month stint ended up being about 2.5 years. So it was towards the end of our just over 2-year tour when we got hit. It was just madness, but it was good. I really enjoyed it over there.
Yeah. And can I ask you, I mean, this is for the purpose of the people that's listening, the purpose of the live chat and the people who listen afterwards. But I mean, were you on your way home? Was the tour over whenever that happened?
No, we was we got given we were meant to be going down to South Armagh to help the Royal Engineers cover the engineers and, you know, to actually rebuild all the super tankers down at South Armagh. So we were given an extra long weekend because we would have been, you know, in trenches and everything else away from phones. And so we got given an extra long weekend just to go and see our families before we actually went down to South Armagh. So it was just there. We went home and come back, and we were going back from the airport back to camp, and we were all in civilians, you know, in a coach which is the same colour as Ulster bus. And it was a well hit, because I recognised a few years later I got shown, well, on the 25th anniversary, I never seen the faces of the terrorists that actually hit us until I seen one of them, and then I recognised who it was, and it was one of the brothers who was at the airport who actually gave the death threat to the coach as we were leaving. But you get a death threat over there all the time, so he's just taking a notice of it. So it's just one of them things, because he got on the coach twice asking if it was the bus to Belfast. And because, you know, a load of squaddies that have been in the bar waiting for the last flight to come in, you know, we were all there pretty inebriated, you know, because we were off down to South Armagh the next day. So.
And before we go on to what happened, at this point, Kenny, what we'll do is we'll bring Michael in. And again, if you tell us a bit about Michael and, you know, how you know Michael, say hello to him. And then we'll go into the same questions really for Michael, to ask him when he joined the army. And I mean, was this his first tour, and what age was he whenever this happened? So I'm just going to add him to the screen. Kenny, over to you to introduce Michael.
Hi, Mike. You all right? Mike, so we have Mike who's based up in Bristol. So you'll have to listen extra hard to make out that accent, folks, this evening. But Mike is a really good guy. Took Mike a few years before he felt able to come back with the guys to Ballygawley. But he's been back now on a couple of occasions. And I think Mike's journey has been incredible. Like Scouse, he had a real want within him to meet with the people who aided him on that road that night. And Scouse obviously met with the ladies that assisted him on the road that night. And so too, Mike wanted to meet the young Barnes girl as well. So we had an interesting night. If you remember, Mike, we headed up the road to Londonderry parts, and we spent a lovely evening in home of the lady who came to his aid on that occasion. So Mike, again, a big, strong man. I can only imagine, though, at that particular time, he was a much more slimline young fella, the same as Scouse, running about. And we're delighted that you also have come back, Mike, and are participating tonight.
Michael, I would just like to ask you, similar to what I'd asked James, and, you know, was this your first tour of duty? What age were you whenever this happened? I mean, had you been in any other places with the army whenever you joined it? if you just bear with us, people, I think we're having some problems with the feed. Over to you, Michael.
I passed out.
No. Michael, I don't think we're going to be able to go ahead. Say something. Say again. Are we breaking up to you too? Yeah. Please accept my apologies, people. Yeah, we're breaking up. Michael, if you can hear me, or Kenny, maybe if you can give Michael a text.
Hello. Can you
and
hear
what
me?
we'll do. Oh, we can hear you now. We can hear you now. Go ahead, Michael. What age were you on the day, Michael? No, too much of a delay. Kenny, if you maybe text
Hello,
over.
sorry, what was the question?
If you text Michael, Kenny.
Yeah.
Kenny, and just tell him what we'll do is we'll bring him on his own, and we'll do this again with Michael, and we'll go on with James here. So we will, because the feed is actually too bad to Michael. So I'm just going to close the mic here for 2 seconds, and we'll go on. Look, I'm just going over to the live chat for a moment. Okay, let me just bear with me for a second. Mute mic. No, I don't know what's happening there. Okay. So sorry about that, people. We seem to be having some technical difficulties with sound, and this is how technology works. It's always good when it does work. And from the live chat, I would just like to ask each and every one of you, I mean, if you can pop up where it is that you're listening from. I mean, that would be a very good thing, so that we can understand where the people come from that come and listen to feeds like this. So again, thank you very, very much for joining us. So yeah, there we go. So sorry about that. We'll get on with things. So James, back over to you again. And I would just like to ask you, James, if you could give us a description of, I mean, the bus was traveling, yeah? And if you can go from there, if you can just tell me in your own words what happened whenever, I mean, what was your recollections of that time?
I remember every bit. We were at the airport. One of the brothers actually got on the bus twice, asking if this, and then lucky enough we had white kids there as well, but they went on a different transport ahead of us. So lucky enough there was no women and children on our coach, and it was just all the lads from A Company. And one of the brothers actually got on the bus asking if it was the Belfast bus, and as we were leaving, he gave the death threat, like the cutthroat and the thumbs down to the actual bus as we were leaving. And then as we were traveling, we just noticed that there was a black Sierra car or something following us. And we went up, we actually got diverted off Ballygawley because we meant to go towards Cookstown. And then we got diverted onto the A5 up towards Ballygawley. And then we noticed this car again that overtook us. And then I just noticed that a flash of lights. And then I actually got comfortable with my legs up on the seat in front of me because we, as I said before, we were all in the bar beforehand. I thought I'd get about half hour's kit before we actually get back into camp. And at first I thought it was like we had a big accident, like we hit something, until afterwards when you could smell the diesel and the burning oil and the burning diesel. And I got knocked out because I come round then and I couldn't move because I was trapped underneath the back axle of the actual coach. Because there was only a few of us that survived the back end where the bomb went off. And then all of a sudden I was just screaming out, for somebody, because then all I could hear then, pardon my French, was I just thought that come back, when I realised that it was a bomb that had gone off. And then, so I recognised one person, and that was used to work in our camp. I recognised him straight away and found me. And then all the blokes just actually lifted the bus up off me, off the back axle. And then I got dragged out and I got put up onto the road, and I laid in this girl's lap, and it was Grace's lap. And if it wasn't for Grace that evening, and and all the people that were in the coaches behind, which I didn't realise that there was kids helping us, giving us first aid. All our clothes are everywhere, and they were actually picking up bits of clothing off the road and actually putting it over our cuts. And I just laid in this young girl's lap, and I didn't know until, well, it was about 3 or 4 years now. I met her for the first time, which was Grace. So if it wasn't for her, and then people that actually found me under the bus and helped all the rest of the lads, there would have been a lot more that would have died that night. So, people say that we're the heroes. We're not the heroes. We're just out there to do a job. It's the actual people who live over there, not the terrorists, not the IRA lovers or anything else. They're genuine people. They're the heroes to me. They are the heroes because they've actually lived through it. We were only over there for two years, and then we could just forget about it. But you never ever forget about it. Never ever will, because it's such a beautiful place to be. I was only doing a job of work.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I'm speaking from the people from Northern Ireland, and again, I think I speak from the live chat, and maybe the live chat would also like to leave some messages on the live chat board there, so that the likes of James can go back and have a look at what people are saying. But we owe you people a debt of gratitude for coming here to put yourself between, I guess, terrorism, guns, bombs, putting your lives on the line in order to serve and protect and defend the people of Northern Ireland. And that's no matter where the people from Northern Ireland came from. I mean, they were coming from both sides of this political divide. And, Kenny, I mean, we've seen so many times that people like James here has been victims. And it's good to see that James is here to tell the tale. But when you sit and you listen to what happened on that evening, it really, as I say, it's hard to listen to, and not a lot of people know what people like James and others actually went through, Kenny.
That's right, John, and I suppose we need to remind ourselves that there was over 300,000 young men and women who served from the regular army units in Northern Ireland with tours of duty. It was a very, very substantive section of the UK population. And then if you take their families into consideration as well, we're talking about a massive percentage of across the water having a connection with here. So in terms of the role and what the guys were seeking to do, it was a thankless task. And what made it ever more difficult was that it was having to be done within your own land. So it was essentially an extremely intimate situation. It wasn't like perhaps going on tours of duty in other parts of the world, which obviously a number of the guys have done. This was essentially with your own kith and kin. And we look at the connections between the two islands, between Britain and Ireland, and they're totally and utterly interconnected. I mean, James is obviously from Liverpool. The connections that Liverpool particularly has to this place. The guys, whenever they came over, they were both from Roman Catholic and Protestant backgrounds, and indeed no faith at all. There were Muslims. There were all manner of faith denominations within the British Army who served here. But they served irrespective of creed or colour, and they came seeking to do the best that they could do. Now, let's be straight. were there times and occasions that operationally on the ground where decisions were taken in particular circumstances with the benefit of hindsight, things may have been different? Some would say there were. But the actual level of restraint that army showed, despite the intense provocation which occurred for the best part of 3 decades, is second to none. And I do think that we all need to recognise Scouts and others, particularly after what they were subjected to that night. A number of them continue to serve within the army. They came back and they didn't go out onto the streets to take revenge. They held the line and they had a level of restraint that I don't know many other people in the world would have.
Kenny, I just noticed that there was on the live chat there, I'm watching the live chat, I'm going to say to both Kenny and James, but Grace Curry, it was your teddies that saved you. I'm not a hero, just glad I have forever friends. Kenny, is this a lady that was there on the night?
That's the lady that assisted this gentleman, assisted Scouts. So she's linking in tonight from Londonderry. And she knew that James was going to be on tonight, and she said it would be difficult to watch because obviously she's replaying the events as well whenever these issues are discussed, but she nevertheless wanted to be with them in a form tonight. So that's what that's about. She's the second woman in James's life.
Yeah. If I'm just saying this, but I mean, if Grace could summon up the courage to maybe come and talk about it someday, we would love that. So there's an invite to Grace. But as I say, it's just we're not insisting. If only if you felt like that you could do that. I'm just looking at the live chat, James, as I go through, and there's a lot of messages here, and you're going to have you're going to be able to read through these here whenever that we finish the feed. But I have to say, there's a lot of messages of support and really saying that you were heroes. You were selfless when you came here to serve and protect the people, knowing what you were going to be putting yourself into. And let's face it, it was a bloody conflict in terms of, so many people was killed throughout the years, and I'm sure that must have always played on people's minds whenever they were coming here to Northern Ireland. And James, can you just tell me, you came here, you served for 2 years. Whereabouts was it that you were based? And also, could you just talk about, the type of duties that you were involved in whilst you were here in Northern Ireland?
When we first come over, we had all South East Fermanagh, Rossley, all that. We had all the 7 PVs, medical checkpoints, from Derry and all the other. And all but it just, just meet and everything else, and then we helped out the Green Howards in Londonderry. We were all over, and then we had the big flood in Omagh, and then we were helping all the Walmart and everything else. It was such lovely people. It's just one amazing place. I wouldn't think that there was terrorism over there, but it's like we hear things every day when you're over there, shootings and little bombings and everything else, and then you ring up home and you say, you heard about the shooting today, but they never hear about major stuff that England heard about. It was just I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time over there. Really did. It's just the after. That is my killer. It's just afterwards. When you get out and you're forgotten about and everything else.
and we've heard that story all too many times where, once you leave the British Army, I mean, the support's not there for people like yourselves. And James, I mean, I would like to also ask you, I mean, obviously that was an event that would have caused anyone trauma. I mean, could you tell me about the aftermath? I mean, how long did it take you to recover from your injuries? Also, I mean, what was the after cost of that in terms of, I mean, did you have PTSD? Did life change? Did life change forever as a result?
Yeah. I started because when we left Oma, we went straight to Berlin, and we were in Berlin when the wall come down, and then going from a 2.5-year posting over where we're in combats, and we never seen any best boots or a set of number 2s, and then going straight over to Berlin where the beer was on flow. You could go out any time you wanted. You weren't restricted. Going from, fighting to these in Berlin, it's a totally different thing. And I went to Berlin because I got married to my first wife about 2 months after the bombing. His first wife knew me before, during, and after the bombing. And then when I got to Berlin, I started doing stupid things like drinking a lot, getting very angry. When I used to go and leave, lost a lot of friends because they were too scared to talk to me because I was fighting all the time, drinking quite a lot. Because people are actually scared to talk to me. I lost my first marriage through PTSD because I walked away from it. I had a nervous breakdown. But then PTSD wasn't really recognised sort of the way it is today. So I had help, but not the help that I really needed, So today I still suffer PTSD, but not as bad as what I used to. It's still there. It's still there. It still hurts. I broke my back. Perforated eardrums. But I just put that down to old age now because I'm 54 now, so it's going into old age where I'm starting to suffer a little bit more. But the anger side, I can control it a little bit better. Plus I got a lovely wife and 3 lovely kids now that actually give me all the support and everything else. With this pandemic going on because my wife's a nurse. So it's a little bit stressful at the moment because I hardly see her anymore. Because she's always in the hospital helping all the COVID patients and that. So it's getting a little bit stressful. But that's life, I suppose. We still gotta live on. Try and be happy.
Yeah, and can you hear that all too often, that there's the after cost to these things? And again, I say to the live chat and the people that is listening, that, I mean, that's the side of things that not a lot of people see. What we see is we see a bomb, we see it on our news, and, we think of people that were killed, or we think of people that were maybe injured and recovered, but we never see the after cost to it in terms of PTSD, mental illness, all the after thoughts and shocks of what happened that day in terms of, I mean, I guess for some even paranoia, that their lives would be in danger. Kenny, I'm sure you see that regularly.
Absolutely, John. And, I suppose we need to remind ourselves that if you think in the context of today and you were to pluck 18-year-olds off the street and to suggest that they would come through an event like Ballygawley, or indeed any other traumatic event where you essentially are witness to, your friends and your colleagues dying before your eyes, where you're, really severely injured, where you fear that you're about to die, as many did. It's inconceivable to think how today's generation, in many ways, in the broader community sense, would have coped with that. So I think we need to always be cognizant that with terrorism and violence, there is a domino impact thereafter. Very much the physical, and I think Scouse would agree with us, as severe as his physical injuries were, the body can heal to a degree, but it's the mind that often is the more difficult to heal, because it's about the reprogramming of that mind to try and instill that you can't allow terrorism to claim the rest of your life, that you almost have got to break free from that and to have some quality. So yes, in terms of relationship breakdowns, addictions that can flow, as Scouse has said, the anger outbursts, that sense of injustice, not alone from the terrorism, but also maybe an expectation that the authorities would have been more supportive to people who had given their all for those same authorities and the state to which we live in. So there are a lot of issues, and I know that the personal stories of the soldiers who have come back, they've all had a heck of a journey to walk over the years. They've got more to walk, but I think something, Scouse, that you had said really stuck with me in the early days when you were being interviewed, one of those early interviews, and you had said that when you left Northern Ireland the first time, that you were leaving 8 friends behind, and you felt that in coming back here and returning to England, that you were bringing 8 friends back home with you. And that was, I think, a transformational change for Scouse, and hopefully for others who make that journey back.
Yeah. At this point, what I would like to do, and off the back, I'm going to play a little video clip. And the reason why I'm playing this little video clip is for the purpose of people that's watching and who will watch at a future date, to understand the mindset that would have planted a bomb that would have caused the Ballygawley, these people like Scouse here to be in the position that they were in. So I just want people to focus in on what this man says. So we'll talk a bit about this whenever we come back, and then we'll go on to ask a few more questions.
For the past decade, the IRA has waged a classic guerrilla war that has included attacks on specific military targets. It has also included assassinations and random bombings that have alienated many Catholics because they have resulted in the deaths of innocent civilians. The British and Protestant majority see the IRA as terrorists.
If your kids grew up wanting to go out and shoot and bomb the Brits?
No, it wouldn't bother me. It wouldn't. It would bother me if they wanted to go and join the Brits. Because if they'd ever tried it, I would break their legs.
Have you ever shot anybody?
Yes.
Who?
You can't say that. They're running about the day, they could turn around and get me.
Did you kill someone?
No, haven't went that far.
Would you like to?
I would.
Who?
Brits, peelers, UDA, UDR, Protestants if they have to. Would kill Protestants.
And it wouldn't matter what their lives are all about?
No. They're against the people, they're against the IRA. They shouldn't be here. Best place for them is on the ground.
If, when you were in the IRA, if you were told to go down and plant a bomb in the emergency room at the Queen Vic, at the hospital,
yeah,
would you do it?
Yes. Would be done. I'd put a bomb on anywhere.
In the emergency room of the hospital?
Yes. If I was told to do it, I would do it.
Now, a bomb doesn't know the difference between a Catholic and a Protestant.
Yeah.
How do you accept that?
Civilians have to get injured. Can't be helped.
Civilians have to get injured. It can't be helped. And again, that's just for the purpose of understanding of the type of mindset that was around. It was planting them bombs. And, you know, again, it beggars belief to sit and to listen to that. And then to hear today of people still involved with this organization, with this movement, the Republican movement, who justifies and tries to justify what it was that they'd done throughout the years. And, you know, often Kenny, already here at Forgotten Voices Media, we've talked to so many people, and we've talked to so many people, innocent people, that hadn't done anybody any harm. And, you know, the terrorists, they would say that, you know, the British Army, they were the enemy. And, you know, they would try to justify the planting of a bomb that would say, blow up that bus at Ballygawley. But, you know, I don't buy that. And no one should ever buy into that, because these people, as I say, they came here without fear or favour to protect both sides of the community. And often that they did. And, you know, I talked about it on other streams. And again, I'm going to talk about it again. But, you know, the likes of, say, for example, McWillett's on Springfield Road, where he threw himself onto a bomb to protect nationalists and Catholic people, and you know, and he was killed, and the Catholics and the nationalists weren't. So don't let any of them tell you that you know, the British soldiers, they weren't here, and they weren't here to protect both sides of the community, because that was absolutely the case. So, James, I would just like to move over and just like to ask you a question based on, I mean, to see that mindset, to understand that this man says that he would plant a bomb in the Royal Victoria Hospital in the accident and emergency. You know, have you any thoughts on that, James?
Yeah, they're just well, I heard that they tried to finish us off in the hospital. I heard any of that, what that bloke said before, I take it he was a terrorist. You know, because I never heard the thing, all I just seen was his face, and he looked like a right little scumbag. You know, they're just cowards. That's it to me. You know, they run away and hide. I've done it. You know, why can't they just face? You know, face to face. Why cover the faces with balaclavas? You know, I knew half of them face to face over there. You know, when we used to P-check them and everything else. You know, Sinn Féin and all that. You know, I could name quite a few, but I'm not going to name who they are. You know, I know quite a few names down in Rosslea and everything else. You know, I'm not going to name them on this, but they're just scumbags. They're cowards. You know, they blew us up. They got in the car and run away. So why didn't he just stay there and go, we done that? You know, they say it afterwards, you know, but the SES got them a few weeks later, you know, because they tried to get someone else, you know, and all hell broke loose because the SES killed them. Don't they look at it and go, what they done a few weeks earlier? You know, killed 8 young lads, 8 of my friends, seriously, the 28 of us, that ruined the rest of our lives. You know, at the age of 21, my army career was over because of a scumbag. You know, it boggles me, you know. And they want a pension as well. You know, talk about the pension. You know, they want a pension for getting hurt. You know, oh dear, I'm a terrorist. I've just cut my finger with a piece of paper. I want compensation. How about us?
I can see how that it would make you angry, especially when you're watching the appeasement process as it goes forward. Kenny, you know, would you like to elaborate a bit and tell us a bit about? I mean, James had said there that the SAS, I mean, they were involved in something else and they were caught. Do you know anything about that, Kenny?
Well, I suppose, John, look, a level of this here is obviously, it has never faced a court of law because the individuals concerned are dead, so you have to be careful. Yes, but obviously in the context of what is believed, there were 3 individuals whom were killed by the SAS. There were 2 of the Hart brothers, Michael and Gerard Hart, and also Mullen, Brian Mullen, and they were understood to have been the individuals responsible for Ballygawley. They were said to be on their way to murder Fred the Coleman, connected with the Stanley Barracks, where the guys obviously were stationed. Now, the circumstances obviously of that particular operation were, as we understand, that there was an immediate threat on life, and that the SAS discharged what they did in that context. But I suppose what we've always said, and I think that Scouse has acknowledged this as well, and others, that it is the dogma and the ideology to which these individuals seemed able to subscribe. The godfathers who recruit them and who filled their head full of what they did, that they were then able to go out and dehumanize Scouse and others to the point of being able to steal life. That's where the real sadness is in this, because I don't think any of us, unless we come from a warped mind, would take glee in the loss of human life in any circumstance. But undoubtedly, the terrorist gets up in the morning with the objective by the end of that day to have taken life or to have caused carnage. The life of a soldier in the overwhelming majority of situations is to preserve life and is to ensure that peace prevails. So those are 2 very different mindsets from which to come from. And that is why whenever people use a term such as competent, get it the heck out of the way of describing these issues, because there is no way in heck that James Leatherbarrow is a competent, like a member of the Republican movement or indeed of so-called loyalists. He is not. He is a legitimate soldier.
And at this point, what I would like to do, because of the direction and where the stream has went, is I would just like to play a little short video clip here of a guy that was on our screen just a few weeks ago, and I'm particularly aiming towards what happens at the end of this clip. And we'll come back and we'll talk about it, and we'll go over to James and we'll ask James's thoughts whenever we do this, Kenny.
Robert, being Robert, he was a person who liked to help people. He was a kind soul, and he decided he was going to leave Monsanto and go into the RUC. So Robert went off in 1972, and Robert trained in Enniskillen, and then was stationed in Glenravel Street in North Belfast. Sadly for us, on the 15th, going into the 16th of July in 1972, I remember on a Sunday morning, I was lying, it was a sunny day, the sun was coming through the crack in the curtains, and my sister came into the room, and she went over to my big brother, Terry, who was sleeping in the other bed, and I heard her whispering in his ear, Terry, and she was crying, and I was 10. As soon as I heard the words, it's Robert, he's been shot, it was awful, and the tears flowed, and it was an emotional, absolute roller coaster and nightmare from then on. It was an incident was phoned in on a forecourt of a garage. There had been some sort of a break-in, or alarm had gone off, and they needed the police to visit. Now, if you think about that one thing on its own, those guys were going out not to visit any harm in anybody, they were going out to help people in a nationalist area. And Robert volunteered. He was off duty, he volunteered to get into that police car, and he was in the back seat. So they went to the place where the alleged incident had happened, and there was an ambush set up there. And when Robert's patrol car came past, they opened up, and Robert was sitting in the middle of the back seat, and he was shot. He went unconscious, and he didn't regain consciousness, and that was it. He passed away. As a 10-year-old in the town, I can remember shortly after the incident happened, we had to get extra security on our house because some people took it upon themselves to come and shout obscenities. It wasn't easy for a 10-year-old to look at that and to, just get on with things. I suppose my life took a different direction at that time. But because of the way my mum was affected by Robert's murder, she wouldn't countenance me going to either of the schools like Dalriada or Coleraine-Enst, which meant a bus journey. She had already lost a son, and she was so fearful that she was going to potentially lose another. Those things have a huge impact. It changed the way our dynamic was, and certainly it changed my mum's life forever. She never got over it. However, what it didn't do, it didn't encourage her to encourage us any feeling that we should go out and do the same on our neighbours in the nationalist community. It makes me very, very sad whenever I see things like the funeral that we see on TV just yesterday, and I see young people who didn't live through the Troubles, young guys who are walking side by side at a coffin of a man who's in his 60s, the old brigade now, and those young men are being indoctrinated with warped vision. So a question I would ask is why is it always pushed into the minds of these young people to continue on where the previous heroes have left off? Heroes I use in inverted commas.
And I guess where I was aiming there was at the very end. I mean, just a few weeks ago in Londonderry, we witnessed that funeral, Kenny, and we witnessed the funeral with the young people walking alongside. As Shane says that he was a man in his 60s, and those young lads, looking at some of them, I mean, some of them were in their teens, and they weren't even around. They weren't born whenever the so-called ceasefires occurred in 1994. So does that suggest that maybe these people are still indoctrinating the young? They're still recruiting the young, and they in 1994. I remember looking back, and I remember the talk of peace, and I remember thinking that it could be a good thing that if only these people would make amends for the things that they've done in the past, the bitterness and the hatred, and that goes both ways. That was between both communities, but seemingly, it continues to happen. It continues to, they tell us that the IRA have left the stage, but that proves otherwise, Kenny.
Absolutely, John, and I suppose it's a big factor of our own work here, where we're very conscious of young people and the vulnerability that they have to being targeted once more by these terror organizations. There's an old phrase that I think is very apt, that the personalities change, but the problem remains the same. And in the context of this place, I think there's a lot of truth in that. We obviously have gone through a period over the last 20 odd years where their violence has receded, but violence certainly has not ended. And the realities are that whenever this keeps on bubbling in the background, it keeps people locked in a situation where there aren't the abilities to make steps across the divide in the manner in which people would otherwise want to do, because of the fear of what that will bring from terrorism, but also people fearing that they will be ostracized by people within their own immediate community. So we are in a very much standoff situation in Northern Ireland at the moment. It's very toxic. It's fragile, and obviously the issues wherever you are on the debate around Brexit, but things have been bubbled up over this last period of months, and certainly there's a great deal of concern, I think, within the community at the moment. And I suppose whenever people watch those type of commemorative events and the age profile of some of the young people there, you do despair. And I suppose what we have always said is, it's one thing for us to say to the Republican movement that their war, for their perspective, was wrong and unjustified. They need to sit their own grandchildren on their knees and tell them straight, we believe we had grievances against this state, but it did not legitimise us taking the lives of our neighbours, because ultimately that is wrong and you must not go down that road. That message is not getting through. it's the heroes, the martyrs message that remains, and that is very, very dangerous for the future.
Before I move on to James, I mean, I'm going to try to appeal to anyone that would be watching here, and we know through one of the platforms that we're broadcasting into, a group there called Expose the Republican Narrative. They've thankfully they've allowed us to do these live streams through their platform, and we know that there's Catholics on there, there's nationalists, there's probably Republicans, and you know, this is a message to them. I mean, would it not be better that if you didn't indoctrinate these young people, if you taught people that terrorism doesn't serve any purpose, it doesn't serve anybody, it doesn't, you know, it's certainly not a foundation to be laying for the future. You know, the bitterness and the hatred of the past, it's probably best put behind you, and it's probably best that what we do try to do is that we try to, you know, it'll take a while, but we try to work together as respective communities. We try to give each other space to you know, to get over the things that have happened in the past without going on and agitating and re-traumatizing the victims. You know, we've had so many victims on this platform over the weeks, and I have to say, it would bring a tear to your eyes listening to some of the stories. And, you know, one of the things, and I'm going to go on to James here in a second, but one of the things that I'm amazed at is that whenever I ask these victims, I mean, what is justice for you? I mean, the reasonable answers that we get is almost mind-blowing, you know. I would say that people that aren't victims, people that just grew up over the course of the Troubles, I guess would be more militant than the victims themselves. The victims, all they want and all they would hope for, in most cases, is for people to be left alone. For these people to, there's a famous phrase, we haven't gone away. Well, it's probably time that they did go away, and it's probably time that they stopped, just like that funeral that you've seen. I guess building their communities in a way that serves absolutely no purpose. No decent purpose, that is. James, James, I mean, you're a victim. We've talked about, you know, what happened to you. Everybody can see clearly the trauma that you've been through. You talked about your army career was over at a very, very early age as a result of what happened. You also see, James, that, you know, as a result of the appeasement process, on one hand, we have terrorists, IRA terrorists, all terrorists. They have immunity, I guess, from prosecution, and yet veterans are still being trailed through the courts in their old age. Now, I'm not here to say that nothing went wrong within what happened in Northern Ireland, because often things did go wrong. But from your point of view, what would be justice for you? Would you like to see people going to jail? Would you like to see an apology? I don't know, you know, remorse for what happened to you? What would be justice for you, James?
Just me. I like to have an apology off, you know, off. Whatever is dead, you know, and the other guy, I can't mention his name, you know, because they're the ones that give the others out, you know, and they turn around and said they've not got blood on their hands. Nah, my ass, you know, I'm not bothered if I swear, my ass, you know, they got blood on their hands. Justice, they go to prison, they get let out, you know, there's all them poor people that died through terrorism in Northern Ireland, all the innocent people and everything else. Yeah, we were doing a job over there, so we expected it. You know, it's just all them poor innocent people, the children they've killed, you know, years and years ago, you know, where they try shooting at a bus with little school kids, you know, the cowards, the scum, you know, that's all I can say. That's all I can say about them. Just cowards and scum, you know, and it's the poor innocent people that are the victims. It's the innocent people that are the victims, You know, and the terrorists turn around and say that they're the victims. They're not victims. They've got a choice. They can go, no, I'm not going to plant that bomb. No, I'm not going to do that shooting. No, I'm not going to do that kneecapping. You know, they phone people up to get invited to go and get kneecapped because they've been naughty. They've been selling drugs. You know, they've been robbing cars. You know, they ring people up and say, you got to meet you down this alleyway. Because I see that on a documentary. You know, what type of people are they? They're just cowards. You know, and they do it with balaclavas on. Do a show in your faces. They won't. They won't. You know, that I showed my face every day walking the streets. You know, I wasn't hiding my face. You know, we got spat at, we got petrol bombed, we got paint bombed, we got kicked. Dogs were going after us because we seen people in Londonderry and Strabane actually hitting the dogs with combat jackets and trousers. So when the dogs seen us walking down the street in combats, the dogs would go for us straight away. You know, we've seen that. I had a dog go for me. I wouldn't kick it, you know, just to get it away. You know, it's just the evil in what they do sometimes. You know, a lot of people in this group don't see that. You know, it's like the politicians, they don't see what's good. They just see it on screen. You know, it's like I got asked on the inquiry, why didn't I say nothing about the death threat? I've got that on my mind all the time. Why didn't I say anything? You know, that's what plays on my mind all the time. And I got asked that question, why didn't I say anything? So I just said to the judge, whoever he was, you put on a set of combats, you go out in them streets and you come back and tell me how many death threats you get. Because we live through it every day. Because we're soldiers. You know, and that's what it boils down to at the end of the day. You know, that's what I've always said. You know, we should just doing a job. It was our place of work. You know, it's the people that lived over there that wasn't involved in terrorism or anything else. They're the heroes to me. We're not the heroes. You guys are the heroes because you've lived through it from childhood all the way through. I was just there for 2.5 years, and I could have just turned my back on it, and I never did. You know, I got in contact with Kenny 25 years after. That's how long it took me to go back there, because I didn't know that the Omagh townspeople built a memorial on the roadside. I didn't know that until I seen the live stream, and I put a comment on, and that's how I met Kenny. You know, if it wasn't for Kenny and Seth, I wouldn't have met Grace. I wouldn't have met all them lovely people. You know, and afterwards you realise how nice Northern Ireland is, and the Protestant Catholic people are. But a lot of people are just, Catholics, the Proddies, the Catholics, the Proddies, the Catholics. I'm Orange Lodge Protestant, and I'm married into an Irish Catholic family. You know, I couldn't do that over there, but over here we can. You know, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just getting a little bit worked up over it now. But it's.
And can I ask you one more question in terms of, I mean, what's happening here? I mean, we had a so-called peace process, but it's known as the appeasement process. And it doesn't matter what these terrorists do, what the organization, the Republican movement do. In 2016, they committed 2 murders, one in the markets and one in Short Strand. The then chief constable of the PSNI had said that the Republican movement actually done that. And it doesn't seem to matter because they have to be part of this appeasement process. How does it make you feel when you see our British establishment, the British government, and, you know, people that are in power that is meant to be serving and protecting us? How do you feel whenever they are rolling over left, right, and centre in order to appease these terrorists?
I think they're just washing their hands of it. I think, you know, just to keep the peace. You know, because imagine them, they, I used to call them the RUC, them going in to arrest a terrorist, all hell break loose. It would cause riots, so that's why they do it. They just thought, just brush it under the carpet. It's put another poor innocent person getting murdered, and it just gets brushed under the carpet, and it shouldn't, because they know if they get caught, they go to prison for 10, 15 years, and they know that they'll be let out, but they'll be well looked after in prison. It's just crazy, and a poor soldier does something years and years ago, and he's going through all this crap. It's just beyond the joke. Because we were restricted to what we could do over there. I'm not going to go into what we, to what we could and we couldn't do, but it's just crazy. For us, and the politicians in the country don't back any of it. They should back. We took the Queen's shilling. We swore an oath to defend this country, to defend our Queen, and that's what we were doing. We were defending, even though it was, we were helping, both sides. And I got penalised for it years and years later. It's just crazy. We get out the army and we just get told to crack on. And that's what I find quite hard. It's crazy. It's crazy. I think if it wasn't for my wife today and my 3 kids, I don't think I'll be here today. Because a few years ago, I did try to commit suicide quite a few years ago, about 20 years ago. Because I couldn't handle it anymore. Listen to all this, the peace process, that was brilliant. That was great. And then there were still shootings, there were still bombings, and nothing was happening. I'll still say that.
Sorry, James, I've got I thank you for coming on our stream and sharing your story with us and sharing your story with the people that's on the live chat and the people that'll come to watch this. And it's very, very important that people hear those stories, because right now we have a huge operation, Kenny, in terms of the rewrite of the history and the rewrite of the history to favour the terrorist version of what happened. And, again, I have to say, and I have to make this very, very clear, that here at Forgotten Voices Media, we're not here to stir anything up. We're not here to, offend any Catholics or any nationalists. I mean, the greater number of Catholics and nationalists are decent people, just like us. The greater number of people within the Catholic nationalist community, whether that be in Northern Ireland, whether that be in the Republic of Ireland, I mean, they don't want any truck with the terrorists. And when they see these young people walking alongside, coffins at funerals that weren't even born when this was happening, they look at these sinister men and they think to themselves, what are you people doing? Have you learned nothing from the past? Have you learned nothing from the hatred and the bitterness that has been caused and put into these children's minds? These people just don't seem to understand, Kenny.
Yes, and John, I suppose we've touched on there earlier that I think often we miscommunicate what our troubles are actually about, what that violence was about. It's not about religion, because religion isn't what that is. I remember it said often as well that this place of Ireland, north and south, is full of religion, but there's practically no Christianity. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. But in terms of you know, what we have there at the moment, and the bubbling under the surface, and the goading that goes on, the poking in the eye day and daily of people, that there is keeping this place just back in those days. And when you see people talk in a manner lately about their concerns around are things becoming volatile again, they're hearing and seeing a hatred amongst some young people that just seems to be an anathema. It just does not seem right how that can be. And it's not alone a case that's being heard within their peer group or within a school-based environment. Ultimately, it starts within the home. And we have got to start having a real honesty around our issues of the past. And we have said it before, and I know that the fellas in Ballygawley, we've had these conversations. Whether it's Republican or Loyalist terror, it created carnage. So-called loyalists did not murder people for God and for Ulster. They murdered people because of their deemed faith and ethnicity. In many, many occasions, sectarian crimes. Just in the same way that the Provisional IRA murdered for sectarian and ethnic motivated reasons. And we have a situation now where the place is still very much fragile, where we have a segregated education system, we have segregated housing. The place has not come together yet, and we're 25 years on from that second ceasefire. So there's a heck of a lot to be done still. And I suppose it behoves all of us, because the wider community can no longer simply pass the buck and say that these issues are nothing to do with us. Every one of us has got to do more, has got to stand and challenge these issues. It's not acceptable that terrorists can walk the streets of Northern Ireland in regards to funerals when their so-called volunteers die. And yet they break those rules of COVID to the nth degree. And then other families, and I know that even within James's family over this period of COVID, they lost a family member. You're prevented and stopped from actually being able to grieve in that natural communal way. That's the way that we have. We have the rule of the mob in this place, and that needs to stop. Good people need to speak up louder, and they need to challenge these illegal mafia people within our midst.
And that's definite, and that's no matter which side of the communities that you come from. I mean, when ordinary people stand together and tell these people to get off their backs, I mean, there's a lot more of ordinary people than there is of these terrorists that, for their own ends, what they continue to do is they continue to indoctrinate and to cause problems in this country. I mean, just over the weekend there, we've seen another scenario developing again in this, this so-called struggle, where they're putting the police now under pressure, and the police are going to even be more, I would say, standoff and frightened to go anywhere near them because of the onslaught that would follow each and every time that the law enforcement tries to enforce the law. And this is where we find ourselves in 2021. So again, I'm appealing to the ordinary nationalists, the ordinary Catholics, whether that be in Northern Ireland, whether that be in the Republic of Ireland. It's time that as a collective, we all told these people that it's not acceptable anymore. And it's also time that our politicians began standing up for what is right, and stop this facilitating and pandering to what is wrong, because we see that happening on a daily basis. James, I would like to thank you for coming on, and honestly, I know that it was a big thing for you to do this, and we really appreciate it. And James, I would encourage you to go back over the live chat whenever you come off the screen, because there's a lot of messages there, for you, and we hope to have what was it they called the other guy there, Kenny, that was coming on?
So it's Mike Drew. Mike Drew.
We hope to have Mike Drew on at a later stage, Mike, whenever we can get the problems ironed out with the sound. I think a lot to do with the sound this evening was probably it's quite stormy weather outside, And, you know, given that we're broadcasting to England, I think that's why we're probably having those problems. So I'd like to thank the live chat for coming along, for all your messages. And I would ask you to continue to put those messages up, to thank James and also Mike for coming along, and, you know, give them a big warm welcome from wherever it is that you're from, whether that be in North. I mean, I've asked people there to put up where they were from, and there's quite a few different places on the live chat at the start. So thank you very much for coming on, and we're coming to the end of the screen. But what I would like to do just before we go off, and then we'll come back and we'll ask everyone to say goodbye. Again, we're promoting what it is that we do here at Forgotten Voices Media. We aim to tell stories, the real life stories, just like James here and like Mike. And, you know, with the help of Kenny, we can access victims, real victims, you know, people with stories just like these people. And what we can do is that we can provide a counter to the rewriting of history, and we can document everything that we do, and we can cut little clips out of these videos, which can be put out onto the various internet platforms, in order that people can see what the real truth was, and in order that these people, these sinister people, they don't get away with the rewriting of the history. So we'd just like to play another little clip that we've cut from a live stream that we had just a few weeks ago. And this was from a man from Southern Ireland, and a man that, you know, he lost his father, and his father he was in the Irish Army, the legitimate Irish Army. And, you know, this man's called David Kelly, and I would just like I'd like to ask you to listen to David's story. You're a victim, a real life victim. You probably are traumatized and re-traumatized by some of the actions of these people even today, and their lack of remorse, I guess, for what had happened. I mean, David, what exactly are you fighting for? You know, is it truth? Is it justice?
Well, I guess I would have, see, as a reaction to what happened to us, me and my family, my mother and my younger brothers, we all moved to London. So we were sort of out of the picture in our formative years. But I returned as a young man, and I looked around and said, you know, who killed my father, you know? And how is my father being remembered, or is he just going to be forgotten completely? You know, a footnote in the history books. And then as I made more and more inquiries into what happened to my father, I was saying someone should be held to account. And I was thinking along the lines of, yes, someone in a court of law being found guilty. So, you know, that's where I would have been coming from. In more recent years, like it's 37 years this year since it happened. I'm not so much interested in someone serving a prison sentence, to be honest, at this stage, but it's more to just have someone held accountable in some form, whether it's in a criminal or civil court, or there's a public inquiry. I know there's other methods like coroner's court and so forth. It's just to have someone held to account, so it should be remembered in the history books of what actually happened on that day, and there could be no muddying of the waters. I mean, for years, what I call the Provisional Republican Movement, which includes Sinn Féin, would have spread malicious rumours that my father was actually killed in a friendly fire incident, and it was all covered up by the authorities. So that's a constant lie I've had to deal with for years. You know, so that's where it's just getting that truth out there. I reckon the sacrifice my father made, so that we don't have we don't get to a point like where you have elected TDs walking around Dáil Éireann actually saying that the provisional IRA armed struggle was legitimate and nobody actually countering them. I'm here to say, hold on, what about my father and the young Garda and the others who were killed, the other members of the Irish security forces and civilians? You know, their lives mattered. And you know, you'd be spitting on their graves if you don't stand up and speak on their behalf when these people make their ludicrous claims. The Army, in collaboration with the council, put up a lovely memorial plaque for my father, a memorial stone, I should say, and it's lovely. But only a short distance away is a memorial to an IRA hunger striker, Kieran Hertzson. So every time I stand and admire my father's stone, but then only a matter of yards away is a is a memorial stone to a man from the organisation that murdered my father. So, like, I'm reminded every time I see that. I'm also reminded, like last year, I had the president of Sinn Féin. She said the legitimate armed struggle was justified, and that if she had been a bit older and had lived in Northern Ireland, she would have joined up as a volunteer. And for me to hear a leading Irish politician say that was re-traumatizing for me.
Kenny, to hear a leading politician in the Dáil say that the Republican struggle was justified, it traumatizes, and it traumatized David Kelly. When he thinks about what the IRA done to his father, and his father was in the legitimate Irish army. So that goes a long way to prove that these people didn't care about their own side. I mean, that was an Irish army officer who lost his life alongside a member of the guards. We'll add that in. And I think, was there another 9 guards over the years that also lost their lives, Kenny?
Yes, I understand that there were 12 in the immediate Troubles campaign, and obviously there are 2 Garda members who have been murdered since by so-called dissident Republicans also. But I suppose the point in it all as well is that the Provisional Republican movement don't view the Garda as their side, and they don't view the Irish Army as their side, because they believe that they live in this utopia of a para-constitution which neither recognises the Republic of Ireland state nor the Northern Ireland state. So in many ways, they would view people who joined on Garda Síochána and the real Ugla na Hurn as traitors to that cause, as they see it. So it's always been the case that I think that we north of the border, and I think to a degree over in Britain as well, we haven't fully appreciated sometimes the huge contribution that the overwhelming majority of those 2 police and army forces made over the course of the Troubles, what they had to deal with in that jurisdiction, where they were treated as traitors, as Lundies, and they were subjected to a lot of difficulty. There were, of course, individuals who sadly did collaborate with the Provisional IRA, but that was the minority, in the same way as that was the case north of the border in terms of loyalist terror. So we do, you're quite right, John, we have a debt of gratitude to pay to the likes of Paddy Kelly, to Garda McCabe, to prison officer Brian Stack, the 3 legs of the southern state, just as we do to the security forces within this jurisdiction.
And Kenny, one more question for you before we move on to James, and we all say our goodbyes. But leading by example, and he's talking about Mary Lou McDonald there when he had said that she was justifying the campaign and saying that she would have been part of that campaign. I mean, that is language which is befitting of a political leader. Have you any thoughts on that, Kenny?
Well, I suppose, John, and I've had this conversation with some political people in the Republic of late, and I suppose I kind of remind them now, you guys are getting what we have had to deal with for 20 years, and indeed well before that point as well. And you see a new understanding on the part of what we would call mainstream political people in the South, perhaps a little bit of a deeper empathy for what people are going through up here, because it's now on their doorstep, and they see the dangers, and they see a political party which is now very much able to present itself as an alternative, an anti-establishment movement, something that's about change and is going to bring better quality of life to people. All those things are very attractive, but when you scratch below the surface, there still is an inherent control of that political party by the Provisional IRA's Army Council, and that's been confirmed by both the PSNI and on Garda Síochána. That's what we're dealing with. And likewise, I want to say it's important that we're balanced in these issues, that what we saw in the recent days in East Belfast, where you had men in large number, almost a show of strength of loyalist terrorism in terms of being provocative on the street. That is not acceptable either. And this talking up as well of the issue of Brexit and that border within our IRC, that somehow could bring about violence on the street from the point of view of loyalism. People need to desist from this sort of talk, and they need to be mindful of where that talk brought people to before. It brought people to their deaths, it brought people to their prison cells, and it achieved very, very little. So right across the board, we need calm heads now, John. That's what we need if we're going to wade through these very difficult waters.
And again, I'm appealing to the people that will be watching their screen and the people that comes to watch your screen afterwards. I mean, I would love to really access people in the Dáil, you know, people that are in power right now, to have those open and honest debates with them, to see if there's any way in which, you know, that people's language could be curtailed. And I guess that we would need to appeal to our own Parliament in Westminster to see if it could be done from there also, because, I mean, it seems to be that it's so open and it's so, you know, blatant nowadays where this language can be used in a way from our political people in political power, even within the Stormont Assembly, where we see it going on a daily basis, where they continue to stoke tensions and wind communities up to the point whereby that we end up in a very, very dangerous position. So isn't it time that the pledge of office was used and they began actually sticking by the rules? You know, I mean, if you become an MP, I would say that it would be the same if you were a TD in the South. Well, you would have certain standards to adhere to, but those standards are just not being met, Kenny. James, thank you very much for coming along once again. Thanks to the live chat, and I would say again to the live chat, please leave James some kind messages there and thank him for coming along. So James, I'm just going to again, I'll unmute you, and again, thank you for coming on, James. I really do appreciate that you've come on. Now, I'm going to ask you, James, I mean, for the future, I mean, what would you hope that would happen in Northern Ireland and right around the United Kingdom, and the relationships between, I would say, the people of Northern Ireland, no matter what side of the divide that they come from, and the relationships between people, ordinary people in Northern Ireland and in Southern Ireland? I mean, would you have any messages that you would hope to see happening for the future?
Yeah. Since I've been going back there over the last 5 or 6 years, you know, I've actually seen the difference in change. And, you know, when I was over 30, you know, people still love me today. Feel as scared as I was, you know, when I was over there 30 years ago, when I first went over 6 years ago. Just keep heads up, keep strong. Let's get rid of this COVID. All start working together. You know, the government, get a backbone, sort them out. You know, if you're going to prosecute a soldier, prosecute a terrorist. Soldiers does not need to be prosecuted for doing a job. Prosecute the terrorists. So the government needs to get a backbone and should defend the decisions. Don't let them out. They murder people. Keep them in. You know, life for a life. You know, leave us alone. Let us live our life. Let us keep going. Let us be headstrong. And as I said to all you lovely people over in Northern Ireland, even in Southern Ireland, you know, it's a pleasure. It really is. You are my heroes. We're not the heroes. You are the heroes. You've had to live with it all your lives. As I said before, I was only there for 2.5 years, and I could have turned me back. I never will. Love the place. Love it.
James, thank you very much. And on that note, Kenny, if you would just like to say your goodbyes. I mean, a powerful statement there from James at the very end.
Yeah, very much so. And I think it's whenever people get to meet people and to spend time in their company. There were very many people over the last 7-8 years who come from all different community backgrounds who have had an opportunity to engage with these guys and girls when they come back. people who actually come from nationalist communities who would have felt inhibited over the years to have done so. But now we have a template and a means whenever they come over, when we are staying in a hotel and when we have the service on the roadside, that there is an opportunity for people to freely congregate. And that's what we got to do more of. As you quite rightly said, John, at the start of the programme and throughout, there are many more good people than there are people who want to cause harm in this place. A minority has had the control for too long, and the majority need to take back control. That's what this whole thing is about. And I agree that in terms of our government, when you appease terrorism, you keep on feeding that terrorism, and there seems to be no end to it. What whereabouts do we want our society to actually dip to before it's going to be too much? I think a lot of ordinary people are starting to ask that question more and more each day. So we need to recalibrate things. We need to say it to the terrorists and to their political advocates. You need to step it up. You need to move yourselves up to this bar, because we ain't going to lower it any longer for you.
And on that note, I think that we'll close. Thank you very much, James. Thanks once again, Kenny, for coming on. And we do look forward to the next time. So I'm just going to leave people with an image, and then we're going to play us out with that song again that we played at the start.
John, I was just going to say, John, sorry, I was just going to say that never would you have such power than to mute a Scouser and stop them from talking. So for the first time, he's not able to talk.
Yeah. Again, it's not.
You'll never walk alone, mate.
You'll never walk alone.
And it's not intentional. It's just to stop the bad feed from coming through. James, thanks very much for coming on. I would just like to ask everyone again to understand what this man had went through in his efforts to serve and protect the people of Northern Ireland, to stand between terrorism and a sense of normality. So I'm popping this picture up, and then we're going to play us out with a little song. So I would just like people to focus on this picture. And there we go. James and his friend, they survived this bus bomb.
British soldier stood, talking to the people there, if the people would. Some just stared in hatred and others turned in pain, and the lonely British soldier wished he was back home again. Come join the British Army, said the posters in his town. See the world and have your fun, come serve before the crown. The jobs were hard to come by, could not face the dole, so he took his country shilling and enlisted on the roll. But there was no fear of fighting, the empire long was lost. Just 10 years in the army, getting paid for being bossed. Then leave a man experienced, a man who's made the grade, a medal and a pension, some memories and a trade. Then came the call to Ireland, call had come before, another bloody chapter in an endless civil war. The priests, they stood on both sides, the priests, they stood behind, another fight in Jesus' name, the blind against the blind. The soldiers stood between them, between the whistling stones, and then the broken bottles that led to broken bones. The petrol bombs that burned his hands, the nails that pierced his skin, and wished that he had stayed at home, surrounded by his kin. The station filled with people, the soldier soon was bored, but better in the station than where the people warred. The room filled up with mothers, with daughters and with sons, who stared with itchy fingers at the soldier and his guns. A yell of fear, a screech of brakes, a shattering of glass. The window of the station broke to let the package pass. A scream came from the mothers as they ran towards the door, dragging children crying from the bomb upon the floor. The soldier stood and could not move, his gun he could not use. He knew the bomb had seconds and not minutes on the fuse. He could not run to pick it up and throw it in the street. There were far too many people there, too many running feet. Take cover, yelled the soldier, take cover for your lives. And the Irishmen threw down their young and stood before their wives. They turned towards the soldier, their eyes alive with fear. For God's sake, save our children or they'll end the short lives here. The soldier moved towards the bomb, his stomach like a stone. Why was this his battle, God? Why was he alone? He lay down on the package and he murmured one farewell to those at home in England, to those he loved so well. He saw the sights of summer, felt the wind upon his brow. The young girls in the city parks, how precious were they now? The soaring of the swallow, the beauty of the swan, the music of the turning earth, so soon would it be gone. A muffled soft explosion and the room began to quake. The soldier blown across the floor, his blood a crimson lake. They never heard him cry or shout, they never heard him moan. And they turned their children's faces from the blood and from the bone. The crowd outside soon gathered and the ambulances came to carry off the body of a pawn lost to the game. And the crowd, they clapped and jeered and they sang their rebel songs. One soldier less to interfere where he did not belong.